Kendrick Lamar just got ambushed on a podcast, and the Mallerie brothers accidentally exposed the entire Drake playbook in real time. Stop everything. Because what just crawled out of the Mallerie brothers' microphone might be the most desperate, most transparently coordinated hit job the hip-hop internet has witnessed in the last decade. Two grown men sat behind a podcast desk and told a global audience, with the full weight of what they clearly believe is analytical seriousness, that Kendrick Lamar, the same Kendrick Lamar who ran the radio for a calendar year, snapped a Billboard record older than most of their viewers, headlined the biggest televised performance in modern American entertainment, and closed out the highest-grossing rap tour ever assembled, needs to prove himself again. Prove himself. To who? For what? I've heard wild takes in this space. I've heard people argue GNX didn't happen. I've heard people argue Luther is elevator music. But this one is the crown jewel of the Delusion Museum, and today we're walking every exhibit. Because right on schedule, the news cycle poured jet fuel on the fire. Kendrick Lamar is officially confirmed on DJ Dahi's upcoming producer album. Kendrick Lamar is quietly rumored on Schoolboy Q's next project. And on top of both of those bombshells, the Mallerie brothers unleashed a full tirade insisting Kendrick's next solo album will be, quoting their exact framing, the most important and most scrutinized project of his entire career. They even had the audacity to argue Drake and J. Cole released albums that gave them their respect back, and Kendrick now needs to do the exact same thing to earn his. Let that sit for a minute. Kendrick Lamar needs to earn his respect back. Case closed on their credibility, honestly. And here's the funniest part, the part they hope you don't notice. They somehow managed to have this entire conversation without saying the letters G and X out loud. Like a record that shattered Billboard, dominated awards season, and powered the biggest rap tour in history simply evaporated. Poof. Gone. Never happened. Do I agree the next project will be scrutinized down to the ad-libs? Absolutely. But show me a moment in this man's career where the magnifying glass has hurt him. Name one. Name an album that walked in with hype and walked out with regret. I'll wait. Because Kendrick doesn't just clear the bar, he snaps it, sets it on fire, then dares somebody to build a new one. Post-beef reality check. It was written in wet cement that dried into a permanent monument. Any future project from either of these two would live inside the discourse of the other forever. Fine. That's fair. But somebody explain why Drake apologists keep parading around like Iceman was some crushing victory 2 full years after the smoke cleared. They compare these two albums like they're on the same mountain when they're not even on the same continent. Show me one Iceman record, just one, that touched the cultural gravity of Luther. The rest of us are still waiting. And this brings us to the DJ Dahi angle, which is not a footnote. This is the main event dressed up as an Easter egg. This is the same DJ Dahi who produced Money Trees. The same DJ Dahi who told the origin story on camera about watching Kendrick perform with Dr. Dre at Coachella, going home the same night, cooking a beat, and having Kendrick in his booth by the end of the week. That is not a coincidence. That is fate walking back into the studio and putting the same two people at the same board over a decade later, with a fresh sound and stacked ambition. Producers and artists cool off. Chemistry decays. But these two are still cooking after all these years, and if that doesn't tell you something about what's coming, nothing will. Zoom in on that DJ Dahi tracklist, because it is insanely stacked. Kendrick Lamar, Childish Gambino, Vince Staples, Channel Trace, Raven Lenae, Butch, Amber Mark, and reportedly a handful of names that haven't dropped yet. Every one of those artists moves numbers and commands a devoted streaming audience. A producer album has no business being that loaded. And the second Kendrick's name shows up on that credit list, even at slot 13, even at slot infinity, the entire hip-hop internet is going to press play the instant it goes live. That's the pattern. He turns other people's rollouts into his own stadium event. It's not marketing. It's gravity. Now let me be honest about the whispers. Somebody claiming to have heard the Kendrick cut on DJ Dahi's project is saying the sound is unfamiliar. Not gimmicky unfamiliar. Pivot unfamiliar. That should shock 0 people. Every time he steps into a booth, the odds that he does something sonically new border on mathematical certainty. Good Kid, Mad City was one universe. To Pimp a Butterfly was a jazz-funk cosmic detour dressed as an album. Damn was radio surgery. Mr. Morale was therapy recorded on wax. G-Nex was a West Coast bomb dropped directly onto mainstream radio. Kendrick doesn't recycle. He excavates. So of course whatever cut he lands on DJ Dahi sounds like nothing he's done before. That's not a red flag. That's the brand identity. Which loops us back to the Mallerie brothers. They argued, with a straight face, that Kendrick Lamar's next album is his most important because it's the first project he'll drop under this level of hate. Hate? What hate? Where were these gentlemen when G-Nex dropped and inside 5 minutes every account with an owl in the display name was pretending Squabble Up was mid, TV Off was noise, and Luther was elevator jazz? Where were they when tour headlines were manipulated with arena photos taken hours before doors opened? Where were they when podcast after podcast tried to convince the culture Kendrick had lost his fastball? He was getting battered daily during the entire GNX cycle. The idea that this man has never faced serious hate is not just wrong, it is revisionist history in a tailored suit, hoping nobody notices the receipts stacked outside the door. And here is where the brothers really lose me. They straight up said Drake released Iceman and, quote, put respect back on his name. In what dimension? We have hours of documented content from every major hip-hop outlet analyzing how that project did not accomplish what it was engineered to accomplish. It caught a wave for maybe 48 hours and then sank into the algorithm's discard pile. Meanwhile, Luther is still charting like it dropped last Tuesday. Meanwhile, Not Like Us is still running arenas 12 months deep. Not Like Us won Song of the Year. Not Like Us won Record of the Year. Not Like Us headlined the most watched Super Bowl performance in modern television history. So when you tell me the guy who lost that battle got his respect back, I need somebody to define respect. Because Kendrick Lamar walked away with the belt, the crown, the trophy, the plaques, the receipts, and the AUX cord. Spicy hypothetical. Imagine Kendrick Lamar decides tomorrow to slap Not Like Us onto a deluxe of GNX. Just tax it on. Because that's exactly what Drake did with What Did I Miss on Iceman, right? Same move. Same tactic. Imagine the shockwave. Imagine the streaming spike. The industry would collapse to its knees. Kendrick Lamar probably won't do it, because he doesn't need to. But the fact that he could, and everyone knows he could, is exactly why the Mallerie brothers' entire framework melts in daylight. You cannot demand a comeback album from a man who has never surrendered the throne. Then Rory half-jokingly floated the idea of Kendrick being the #1 rapper of 2026. That is not a joke anymore. There's plenty of runway left on the calendar. Every time he drops, he takes over the cultural conversation for months, sometimes entire seasons, sometimes while Drake is dropping in the same window. So the argument that Kendrick can't dominate 2026 because 2 podcast guys said the field looks crowded, that's a wet paper bag argument. It rips the second you lift it. Let's talk comments, because the comment sections are where the real culture lives. Over on the DJ Dahi announcement post, one person wrote, and I promise you this is a real comment, Kendrick Lamar aside, what an incredible collection of talent, you egregious buffoon. And that might be the funniest read of the entire month, because it perfectly captures how deeply people are trying to downplay Kendrick Lamar's presence on that track list while simultaneously being physically unable to look away from it. Another commenter pointed out that the NFR podcast page doesn't have hundreds of suspicious bot accounts flooding the replies the way certain other pages do. Peak observation. Because let's be real for 1 second. The same people who spend every waking hour insisting nobody wants to hear Kendrick Lamar's name, those are the exact same people who cannot stop typing his name into every search bar within reach. Big shout out to Hip Hop Clips 36 and Summer Hours for calling that pattern out loud. And it gets worse for them. Because every credible whisperer in the industry is saying Kendrick may not be dropping 1 feature, he may be dropping 2. 1 on DJ Dahi. 1 on Schoolboy Q. And a full-length Kendrick Lamar solo album has been circulating in the rumor mill for what feels like a lifetime. So we are potentially looking at a scenario where he drops a feature, another feature, and a solo album inside a compressed window. That is not a man in decline. That is a man reloading 3 chambers at once. The Schoolboy Q piece is not a stretch. Schoolboy Q was literally opening the back half of the Grand National Tour. Anybody who understands how touring operates knows what happens on those buses. Artists record everywhere. Green rooms. Hotel suites. Somebody in the corner with a laptop and a condenser mic. You would be shocked how many so-called studio classics were actually cut at 2 in the morning on a tour bus after the crowd went home. So Kendrick and Schoolboy Q quietly stacking verses on the road is the most reasonable rumor of the week. TD alumni cutting late-night sessions between tour stops is exactly how a lot of classics were born. Alright, fair shot moment. Here's the closest the brothers got to something honest. One of them suggested Kendrick might not drop another album at all. Why would he? He made generational money. He headlined the Super Bowl. He ran the biggest rap tour ever recorded. He has nothing left to prove financially. On paper, clean logic. But here's what those apologists always miss. Kendrick Lamar is not a numbers rapper. He is a lifer. He lives inside the studio even when nothing is being announced. That man is always writing, always cutting, always experimenting. That's exactly why every album lands like a full statement. It's the visible tip of a much bigger iceberg you never heard. Silence from him has never meant absence. It has always meant the pressure is building underground. Now unpack the GNX reservation the brothers keep circling. They argued GNX didn't take listeners on a journey the way Good Kid did, the way To Pimp a Butterfly did, the way Mr. Morale did. They said it was just Kendrick popping out and having fun. Since when is fun a demerit? These same critics never hold anyone else to the concept album standard. They don't demand journeys out of Iceman. But the moment he delivers a West Coast homage, a project that unmistakably has a theme, geography, mood, and message, suddenly it isn't deep enough. You see the double standard. The bar for Kendrick Lamar is always positioned exactly 1 inch above wherever his feet are planted. If he goes conceptual, he's pretentious. If he goes hard body, he's lightweight. If he goes personal, he's oversharing. If he goes political, he's preaching. He cannot win by their rules because their rules were engineered to prevent his victory. That's not criticism. That's a rigged trial. Then the Lupe fiasco tangent, and this one was almost sad. Lupe has been low-key jabbing at Kendrick for years, and the latest wave was Lupe basically arguing everything except the lyricism. Better albums, better team, better catalog. But when it came time to hold a syllable-for-syllable weigh-in against Kendrick, that mysteriously vanished. Truth is, being a great songwriter is not about cramming the highest number of syllables into a bar. It's about crafting the line that lands. The line that carves itself into memory. The line that plays on loop in somebody's head at 3 in the morning. He has been mass-producing those lines since Section .80. So the take that Kendrick Lamar is somehow not that lyrical is one of the wildest revisions of hip-hop history posted with a straight face. Zooming out, the brothers keep insisting Kendrick's catalog is under some new form of scrutiny. What scrutiny? Even DJ academics, one of the most hostile voices toward Kendrick Lamar in the entire ecosystem, has admitted on camera multiple times that this man has only ever dropped classics. Read that again. The loudest skeptic in the space concedes the catalog is spotless. So when the brothers try to convince us there's some fresh escalating tribunal around his discography, I have to ask what dimension they are broadcasting from. Because in this one, that discography is triple underlined in every serious hip-hop syllabus on the planet. Another crack, the one that swallows the whole foundation. They push the big three narrative, Kendrick Lamar, Drake, J. Cole as a real hierarchy. They argue Drake and Cole both got their #1 post-beef. GNX debuted at #1. End of story. The tour was the highest-grossing rap tour ever assembled. Luther ran the radio for a calendar year and is still charting like it dropped last Tuesday. The claim that Kendrick has to chase what those two already did is a fantasy manufactured by people who literally cannot bring themselves to say the words GNX debuted at #1 out loud. Say it once. The entire framework collapses the second you do. And, because we live in a truly unserious internet, one of the brothers hinted Kendrick might just decide to not release the album at all. Like maybe he shrugs, checks out, and heads to Disney World. That is the most disconnected read of his personality ever broadcast into a microphone. Kendrick Lamar is arguably the most competitive artist of his entire generation. This is a man who cornered another artist so surgically that people are still finding hidden meanings in bar sequences from 2024. That man doesn't fold. That man sharpens the sword the moment he suspects nobody is watching. Let's roll through some of the sharpest comments circulating around all of this, because the culture is speaking loud and it deserves airtime. One person wrote, Kendrick Lamar is the only rapper who somehow has to prove himself every single time he's about to drop. No other rapper is treated this way. Good Kid was an instant classic. To Pimp a Butterfly is one of the most critically acclaimed hip-hop albums ever made. Damn rewrote the awards ceiling. What more is there to prove? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But the album will still be picked apart. And that's fine, because he has never once flinched under a microscope. Another commenter dropped, Drake fans have been hating on Kendrick for the last 13 years. 2024 is just when they got hit with the reality check. Sharp. Because that is exactly the pattern. This is not new hate. This is the same hate, just louder, because the scoreboard changed against them. The dislike didn't start with a battle. It started the second his talent made him impossible to ignore. Somebody joked, if Kendrick drops 3 straight trash albums, his career is pretty much cooked. Great logic. Except he hasn't dropped one. Not one. That is the entire critical consensus. Somebody thoughtful posted, every other album Kendrick goes commercial then artsy. It's his time to be artsy again. Fair prediction, but with PG Lang rumored to be involved in the 2028 Olympic ceremony, I actually think he blends both instincts and lands closer to a modernized Damn, mainstream enough to move mountains, cerebral enough to spark essays for years. And to the take that his next album might have rock influence and is supposedly built to alienate casual audiences, this is a man who has been folding rock, jazz, funk, and psychedelic textures into his records since To Pimp a Butterfly. Electric guitar solos live on that album. A genre-bending Kendrick Lamar record wouldn't be a plot twist. It would be a Tuesday. Here's a comment I want to sit with. Somebody wrote, Kendrick has been winning awards at a record-breaking pace, and somehow we're supposed to trust 2 guys on the OVO payroll since 2024 to grade his next album. Devastating. Because that is the crux. When your evaluators are compromised, their evaluations are compromised. Consider the source. Consider the timing. 2 dudes who suddenly discovered a passion for scrutinizing this catalog at the exact moment Drake needed a PR rescue operation. That's not journalism. That's assignment work. Zoom in on DJ Dahi's own words about Kendrick. DJ Dahi said Kendrick was one of the first artists he built a vision board around, a literal mood board of collaborators he needed to work with before he died. DJ Dahi talked about watching him perform with Dr. Dre at Coachella and thinking immediately, I need to send this man a beat. That is the origin story of Money Trees. A producer with a dream. A rapper with a vision. 2 paths crossing at the exact right second. And now, over a decade later, they are doing it again. DJ Dahi also said being part of the Good Kid Mad City moment felt like being part of something that would play forever, not for a season, forever. This is a rapper whose songs are still charting a decade after release, whose visuals are rewatched at Cannes, whose live performances are analyzed in university lecture halls. Forever isn't marketing spin. Forever is what Kendrick earned. I want to Steelman the brothers one more time. They argued the field is more crowded now, and Kendrick's response records from the battle, the ones on the deluxe, sometimes get downplayed in retrospect. Fine. Not every record is a Not Like Us. But even the smaller cuts from that run are still doing arena work. Squabble Up still lifts every stadium off the floor. TV Off still gets remixed weekly. His quiet moments outperform other rappers' peak moments. That's the standard he set for himself, and it is exactly the reason that standard keeps getting weaponized against him. When you build the highest bar in the room, they use it to hang you. Back to the meta question. Is his next album going to be scrutinized? Absolutely. Is it his most important album? Silly framing. Because every Kendrick Lamar album has been his most important at the exact moment it dropped. He doesn't do throwaways. He doesn't do filler cycles. He doesn't do cash grab records to buy a jet ski. Every project is engineered to say something specific about a specific era. Calling the next one his most important is like calling the ocean wet. Yes, that's the whole point of the ocean. Biggest frame, sit with this. If Kendrick dropped tomorrow, brand new album, no rollout, no marketing, no lead single, no trailer, that album debuts at #1. It takes the Hot 100 top slot with a track we have never heard. It generates a week of essays, a month of think pieces, a year of samples. That is what happens every single time. That is the ceiling nobody else in the current landscape can touch on a moment's notice. So spare me that he has to prove himself narrative. That man has been proving himself